But the interesting and sort of befuddling thing to regulators was the idea that this created perverse incentives. There are unintended adverse effects that come from any policy. And the unintended adverse effect that came from this policy is because the law was seen by developers as so stringent that what they would do is intentionally destroy habitat, right, of endangered species, which they haven't killed, but they think the area on our land that we want to develop, this is hospitable to the bald eagle. This is hospitable to the snail darter. This is hospitable to the spotted owl. We don't want any of those species found on our property. So the incentive was to destroy. And so it was argued in the conservationist community during the time, what should we do? Is there a compromise? And this is very controversial, I recognize. I don't want to sugarcoat this at all. Some call it a deal with the devil, so to speak, right, that actually endangers species even further. And others think that this is the only pragmatic way that we could have gone with the intense development in the United States, but to still realistically preserve species and preserve habitat for species. So habitat conservation plans in the early 1990s were developed. And here's the deal. HCPs allow for the development of land where endangered species have been found without liability. But here's the catch. You can get this incidental take permit, which allows for the unforeseen but non-intentional killing of members of endangered species, on the condition that landowners must either set aside habitat, right, or buy additional habitat or both for endangered species that's not developed. So in other words, some of your acreage has to be devoted to species where you will never forest, never use it for agricultural purposes, or at least never meaning how long. It depends upon the time length of the HCP. You can negotiate it to be a 30-year, and some, the longest that I've heard of, are 99-year HCP permits that you sign. And why this is important or interesting to us is because the Karner blues were listed as an endangered species in 1992. Now notice the timing, right? And one of the first things that the forest industry in Wisconsin wanted to do and pushed for was to contact the Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and say, we want to develop with you an application for an incidental take permit and to devise a habitat conservation plan for Karner blue butterflies, and we want to do it statewide. This was the first, and this is where sort of Wisconsin sort of led the way. In 1999, Wisconsin implemented the first statewide HCP for the Karner blue butterfly. And this was established by the WDNR and several paper companies to allow for continued forest production, while at the same time conserving critical habitat for the Karner blue butterfly. Now, were the discussions sometimes heated between these groups? You bet, right? But the interesting thing, and this is the other bit that I should probably put up here, is the range. Notice up here that a lot of these places where there's high probability for Karner blues are in Jackson, Monroe, also, what do we have there? Sorry, Juneau County, up near Eau Claire, in Eau Claire County, Clark County. These are areas that also tend to have what? Some of the best frac sand in the world. More about that a little bit later. The Karner blue butterfly, there's a picture of it. And the interesting thing is that in the world of folks who are interested in environmental studies, this HCP has been held up as being an exemplary case of how private companies and regulators can work together for species survival and also at the same time allow for productive use of land. Lots of HCPs have been hindered by frictions between regulators and landowners, but the Carner HCP has been looked upon as a really well-functioning HCP where by and large people get along. Now, they have some things that work in their favor that I'll talk about in a second, but the concentration of Carner blues is really high in Wisconsin, and in fact, within the state of Wisconsin, this is not really an endangered species. But if you look at the species over the United States, its sort of worldwide population, it is. And according to DNR officials that I talked to, according to lumber companies, according to lots of different folks who are studying in this area, they'll agree that, yeah, by and large, Carner blues are doing well. Whether it's because of the HCP or not, we don't know. Some are willing to sign on and say, yes, this is an integral part of it. Others are more hesitant about this. But there is something that's working in favor of this particular type of HCP.